If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it.
The Knicks are back in action Tuesday. The Charlotte Hornets come to town to face the Knicks at Madison Square Garden. Charlotte has lost 3 straight after losing to Brooklyn on Sunday. They got washed by the Nets in that game. They were down by as much as 37 points in the third quarter. They ended up coming back a little bit, but they lost 102-86 in that game. The Hornets are just 20-46 on the season. The Knicks won the first 2 meetings between these two teams, the last one being a 121-102 blowout in Charlotte on December 2nd. The Hornets have been dealing with a lot of injuries all season, none more devastating than the ones to LaMelo Ball. He fractured his ankle last week and is expected to miss the rest of the season, so no LaMelo Ball in this one. I saw Coach Clifford talk about how he felt like the team has dealt with the bad luck that they've had well, with the exception of that Brooklyn game where they went down almost 40 points in the third quarter. So any concerns about a Knicks letdown coming into this game Tuesday where again expected to be heavily favored?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is a classic trap game coming off the high of a Sunday night national television victory. It's also the Knicks' last home game before four-game road trip. They head out west after Tuesday's game. They play Sacramento, the Red Hot Kings, on Thursday night. But I would have said last Wednesday, when the Knicks had just beaten the Celtics in a huge win, that was arguably the best win of the season at the time, that the Nets were coming in and the Nets would be fired up and the Knicks might have a little bit of letdown. They blow out Brooklyn. Then they go down to Miami. Okay, the winning streak has to snap at some point. 2 great wins at home. They're flying down to Miami. Maybe this is the game the Knicks kind of overlook. And, a Miami team desperate for a victory, no letdown. Beat Miami on a Randall double bang buzzer beater, fly to Boston. Okay, down, double digits in the second half. Maybe this is the game.
Brunson.
Let go of the rope. Let's, regroup. This team doesn't do that. There's a lot of things to criticize Tibbs for, but he demands that these guys are accountable, or just seem to be motivated to play each and every game. So I would say that sure that you should be, it's on paper it's a spot for a letdown game, but this Knicks team have not given us any reason to believe that they're like teams of the past are headed that direction. But again, I think it's at least worth discussing whether not only should the Knicks continue to give Brunson another day off, because it's important to note he sprained or tweaked his right ankle Friday night in Boston. And then he went back to the locker room, had it taped, came back and played. It was his left foot that, he popped up on the injury report with left foot soreness on Sunday.
Yeah.
Tibbs downplayed the injury, said it's not that serious. I think that was his exact quote. But listen, anytime you have an NBA player, and everybody's a little bit dinged up, but for Jalen Brunson to sit out a game on national television against Boston with a chance for the Knicks to win 9 in a row, that worried me a little bit because this team is only going to go as far as Brunson goes. We'll see, what the injury report list, should come out later today. We're recording this Monday afternoon around noon. We'll see what happens, and what he's listed on the injury report for Tuesday's game. But I think they should definitely rest him for that game. He's going to fight to come back as soon as he's in any way, shape, or form close to playing. But not only should they consider sitting Brunson out, but letting him get an extended 4-day mini vacation, 4 days of rest. Maybe sit Randall out too. He's going to want to play all 82 this season, so I assume he probably won't. But even if he does play, as you mentioned, let him play 27 minutes and give Obi 18 minutes on Tuesday night and maybe Thursday or Saturday, whatever the case may be. Let Obi's minutes start to increase over the next couple of weeks while Randall's gets tailed down a little bit.
Yeah, I think to me, when I think of letdown, I don't really think of it for this Knicks team in this game as a letdown in mentality, because this Knicks team seems to have a mentality that is ironclad. It seems like a team that they're a seek and destroy kind of squad right now. They want to go out there and they want to beat you up and as I've been saying, lock you down. So I don't necessarily worry about them coming to the game with the wrong mentality and overlooking Charlotte. I worry about just the legs. Will they have the legs? Will they have enough energy left in the tank? I mean, that was a lot that they spent in that game against the Boston Celtics. You go double overtime. IQ plays the entire second half and then plays all of the both overtime periods. A lot of guys logging north of 40 and 50 minutes. That is where I get a little concerned coming into this game. Like, could they just come out and just not have the legs? Charlotte is awful. I mean, they really, you look at their roster, like they're just not a good team, but they are an NBA team. So if you really are as gassed the way the Knicks may be, any team can be dangerous. So I would be worried about that in this one. I think when I think about this matchup, the one matchup I think that is interesting because it's a guy that I love coming out of the draft and he's starting to play really well is Mark Williams, and a guy who I think in many ways Charlotte looks at him and kind of wants to kind of mold him into a Mitchell Robinson type player. He's had some really impressive games. He had a 20 rebound game recently. And if you watch him at Duke, this is what he was doing at Duke. He's a monster on the basket, dunking alley-oops, blocking shots. I'm really, really interested to see that matchup between him and Mitchell Robinson in this one because in some ways, I think Mark Williams is kind of like one of these young rising centers who we'll be talking about maybe in 3-4 years with Mitchell Robinson and being one of the better defensive anchors in the league.
Yeah, definitely. Mark Williams is from the Mitch Rob, Time Lord Rob Williams mold. A young, dynamic, athletic, high flying, big. So yeah, that another important matchup for Mitch. We didn't even mention him. 14 and 13 last night.
Yeah,
continues to play at a very high level on both ends of the floor.
Hit some clutch free throws too.
Yes,
he didn't make a lot, but he made some.
Yep,
they had to make some. Yeah,
3 of 6. He made a one particular. The Knicks' final point was a Mitch Rob free throw, 1 of 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's obviously something to keep an eye on. But again, in the loss to Brooklyn, Bryce McCowan's played 20 minutes. Svi Mikhailuk, the former Knick, was on the bench for 9 minutes. Nick Richards, those are guys that the Hornets are going to have to rely on, from the bench. Whereas the Knicks are coming in with Josh Hart, IQ, if he's back on the second unit, that's where the Knicks can really separate themselves, from these lesser teams. Because that's where you see usually, in a trap game, your stars will have a night off, but the Knicks aren't really reliant, as we've seen, on one player or 2 players or 3 players. It's that ability to kind of pick up next man up mentality that has really been a key driver in the Knicks' success. Especially over the past 3 months. And now, again, over the last 3 months, dating back to December 4th, Knicks 29 and 14. Only 2 teams in the NBA have more wins, the Nuggets and the Bucks. That's 3 months worth of data here. And so, again, Knicks have arrived. The Knicks are legit.
And I gotta get a bounce back game from Quentin Grimes because one of the we didn't talk about was how awful he was in this one. That foul he had on Jaylen Brown was just drove me. I was maniacal after that foul. I could not believe how, in a play which you're up 3 and you're willing to give up a 2, he's trying to shoot the ball and then he grabs the guy's arm and it doesn't foul him hard enough to secure him not scoring a basket. Just a terrible play. He was pretty much a non-factor in this one. Too many times I thought in this game he was, making those drives on those closeouts and he's not looking to score. And we know he's a good passer, but he's got to also look to score. Like if the defense, I thought, and again, the Celtics, they're very well coached outside of some of the mistakes you saw in game from Joe Mazzulla. They knew the Knicks well. I mean, Grimes is driving baseline and they're looking for his passes. They were diving at Mitchell Robinson, diving at the guys at the 3-point line. And he only had 1 turnover, but he could have had like 3 because there were a couple of deflections and a couple of plays that I think maybe were called blocks that really were more steals because Grimes got caught up in the air and didn't know what to do. And consider he didn't really play well in Miami either. He's got to play better, and I thought Tibbs did the right thing by gluing him on the bench after that foul. He didn't play the rest of the game, and he shouldn't have. Even though we know what Grimes could bring defensively, like you just got to be more in tune with what you're being asked to do or what the situation in the game is. That Knicks team in that huddle is saying, we can't foul, we'll give up a 2. You just can't make those kind of mistakes. So playing against a team like the Charlotte Hornets, he's going to have a lot of mismatches in this one. I think, especially in a game where Randall lobbed big minutes, RJ lobbed big minutes, like they're gonna need some of these other guys to step up. Like Grimes is the guy I want to see. Give me a 20-point game in this one, like just like he did against the Brooklyn Nets, where he, I think, really kind of was the difference in kind of making that game just like a laugher with him being able to shoot the ball the way he did. Grimes needs to be aggressive. And he needs to make up for, I thought, 2 games which he can't have. Like those are playoff caliber games against the Heat and the Celtics. You can't have 2 points and 3 points in those games. Like that was unacceptable.
Agreed. Yeah, it's he's done a good job of bouncing back from bad games this season.
Yes.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of the things you want to kind of fine tune and use these games down the stretch is kind of figure out how to get a guy more involved because there's going to be maybe it's game two, the second half of game two of a playoff series where RJ's struggling and IQ's maybe off that night. Grimes because he's going to be on the floor because of what he contributes defensively. Need to
Yeah.
find a way to get him going offensively when he's not knocking when he's in a little bit of a slump.
Yeah, and then before we move on, I mean, just thinking about where the Hornets are, I mean, right now, they're fully invested in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes at this point. They are one of the worst teams in the NBA. I think in terms of the standings, only Detroit has a worse record in the Eastern Conference, so they will have a decent shot. They should be among the bottom 4 teams that will have equal percentage shots at the number 1 pick, along with San Antonio and Houston. Michael Jordan is their owner. Knicks fans very familiar with Michael Jordan, like most of the NBA is, but particularly what he did to the Knicks in the 90s. What do we think of just him as an owner at this point? I think there was excitement when he bought the team, originally the Charlotte Bobcats, then the Charlotte Hornets. But I don't know. It just feels like the Hornets have kind of perpetually been spinning their wheels with him in charge. It's kind of unclear how much basketball operations he's really, invested himself in. But I think that this Jordan ownership of the Charlotte Hornets hasn't really worked out the way I think that a lot of people hoped.
Yeah, I mean, they're this time last year they were one of the teams that were viewed as like a really young
rising team. Yeah.
LaMelo Ball, Rookie of the Year, great, vastly exceeding expectations. Miles Bridges playing at a very high level.
Yeah.
PJ Washington, some other units. I think the Bridges thing really set them back. As not just as a team this year, but as a franchise. He shouldn't be anywhere near a basketball court until that situation gets legally resolved. So who knows how that thing plays out? But that's a nightmare situation. The James.
I remember earlier this season there was a word that the Charlotte was thinking about bringing him in this year.
It was like a late Friday night news dump.
It was crazy.
They tried to sneak it in, and everyone was like, "Yo, no, like nah." And I think they may have used that kind of floated the weather balloon to see which direction the wind was blowing, and then they realized maybe Adam Silver said, got on the phone and said, "Listen, this is not going to work." The book night draft pick that was another miss. Terrible, So MJ hasn't been great, which isn't surprising. You see guys that are so talented on the floor when they kind of transition to coaching or, these really top talented players. There's a few that are exceptional. Larry Bird had some success both in the front office and on the sidelines. But the Isaiah Thomases of the world, we've seen that it's difficult to make that transition when you're a star, especially when you're a star player. You just have a different mentality. You come in from a different level. You see things a different way. Like it's probably difficult to accept players' limitations and not getting the max out of there. For all the things we love about Kobe, he probably would have been a terrible coach because he wouldn't put up for a second with the player. Whereas sometimes you got to coddle them and understand that they're, if they don't have that maniacal mentality, it's difficult to relate to. So that might be some of the problems with MJ.
Yeah, some of these picks. I mean, you mentioned book night. We can talk about even Kai Jones is not really being able to do much. JT Thor, a young player who's getting some minutes now. It's just, I don't know. And then that Gordon Hayward signing, that didn't make any sense. And this is a team that made back-to-back play-in appearances and got blown out in both play-in appearances games. And now, again, squarely in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes. And maybe this is where they should be, honestly. They get to the play-in, didn't get to the playoffs.
And there's like 4 teams in the mix. Like whoever gets Wembanyama, or if second place Scoot Henderson, that could change. Then all of a sudden you got Wembanyama and LaMelo Ball coming back next year. They're going to be predicted to make the playoffs by a lot of folks. So then you're selling out every night and things are rosy. So as we know, so much depends on those ping pong balls.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with the Charlotte Hornets moving forward. But kind of, as Tommy mentioned, it's kind of wild to think of where we looked at them a couple years ago and where they are now. I agree the Miles Bridges thing really